Hi, I'm Robin, and welcome to English Grammar Now. Today, we're going to be talking about before, after, during, and while. This is Prepositions Part 2. First, let's talk about before and after. These two prepositions are opposites, and we use them to talk about a time that is before, earlier, or after, later, a specific point in time. So, if we have a sentence like, I'll call you before 5 p.m., we're talking about the time that comes before, earlier than 5 p.m. But if we say, she can have the book after I've finished reading it, then we're talking about the time that comes later, after the point when I finish reading. So these two prepositions are opposites, and we use them quite frequently. The time that we're using as a reference can be either in the past, in the present, or in the future. Here's some examples of that. He left before breakfast. This is talking about something that's already in the past. We could say, be sure to get off the train after the stop at Kirk Road. This is something that hasn't happened yet. It's in the future. Or we could say, I've never tried pâté before this. In this case, we're talking about right now. It's the first time we've tried pâté. The time or time event can take a number of different forms. We've seen a few examples already. First of all, we could use a specific time or a specific day to talk about what comes before or after that. For example, make sure to submit the homework before 12 p.m. Or, I'll respond to your email after Monday. So we're using 12 p.m. and Monday as that point in time where we are measuring from. We could also use an event that is happening at a specific time. For example, we will meet you after the party. Or, complete the forms before your flight. In this case, the party or the flight are happening and planned for a specific time. And that's how we're measuring what comes before or after it. We could also use a longer phrase or even an independent clause to talk about which time we are measuring from. For example, we're going to buy a house after Mary finishes school. In this case, the time we are talking about is Mary finishing school. That's an independent clause. It could be its own sentence. But we're using that to describe a specific time, and we're measuring after it. Another example. He cleaned up the whole house before we all got home. So in this case, the time is when we all got home, and we're measuring before that. We could also use a shorter clause that begins with a verb that has the ending ing. This might look like this. I'll take the trash out before going to work. They went home after doing the shopping. So here, this cannot be its own sentence, but we're describing something using a verb plus ing. Going to work and doing the shopping. And those are planned for specific times. Remember that if you must complete something before a time, when that time comes, it is already too late. We are not talking about something that can happen at that time. It must be before it. So for example, you could say, you can get 2-for-1 coffee before 6 p.m. on Valentine's Day. But if you come at 6 p.m., it's too late. Same thing happens with after. You could say, you can call Grandpa after 8 a.m. But If you call him at 8 a.m. exactly, it's too early. You should wait a little more time. Here's a chance for you to try it out. We have some specific times in the box. You can use before or after to join them together with the sentences. See if you can figure out which beginning matches with which ending. Go ahead, give it a try. Here's how we could match up these sentences. Number 1. Everyone was nervous before the quiz. Number 2. Do you need a ride home after the concert? Number 3. Carrie phoned me back after I left a message. Number 4. I'm going to move back home after I graduate. Number 5. What were you doing before you got this job? For each of these, it's pretty clear what we're using either before or after. So I hope you found this one easy. Now let's talk about our other prepositions. First of all, during. We use during to talk about something that was happening for a period of time, or for the whole time of something else, or if there's one thing happening at the same time as another thing is happening. Here's some examples of that. My grandfather was living with us during the pandemic. So, for at least some of the time, during the pandemic, which has a beginning and an end point, my grandfather was living with us. Another example. You can't use your phones during the class. In this case, this is a rule that means for the whole class time, all of it, from the beginning to the end, you cannot use your phone. And the third example. I heard a loud noise during the night. In this case, the night is also a period of time with a beginning and an end. And at some point in there, I heard a noise. So during is especially useful to talk about two things happening at the same time. However, there are a few ways that we do not use during. So let's take a look at them. First of all, if we're describing a specific amount of time, and by this I mean if we're using any numbers to say how much time, we don't use during in these cases. For example, if I want to talk about living in Manila for 4 years, I'll use the word for. I cannot use the word during. So I would say, I lived in Manila for 4 years. We also do not use during if we're putting it together with an independent clause. If the clause can be its sentence on its own, we'll use while. So here's an example of that. While I was waiting for the bus, I phoned my friend. So here we see that two things are happening at the same time, waiting for the bus and phoning the friend. But because the first clause can be a sentence on its own, we'll use while and not during. Now let's take a look at while. Now, usually, while is used as a conjunction, but the meaning is very similar to during. While is used to talk about actions that happened at the same time, either in the past, present, or the future. Here's some examples. The dog kept barking while I was on the phone. You can see that two things are happening, both of them are in the past. The dog was barking, and I was on the phone. Do you want something to drink while you're waiting? In this case, it's happening in the present, asking about something to drink and waiting. Also, we can talk about this in the future. My brother said he'd watch the kids while we're out. This is something that is planned for the future. Watching the kids, and we'll be out. We also use a phrase with while. We say a while, and this means an unspecified amount of time. We're not being specific about how many minutes or hours or even days. We just want to be unspecific. So here's some examples of that. I haven't seen your parents in a while. How are they? So in this sentence, maybe you haven't seen them for 4 days or 2 months. It doesn't really matter. We're just saying sometime. Another example. We spent a while looking in all the little shops by the beach. That took quite a while. How far away is the car parked? In each of these examples, we're not being specific about how much time, but we can use a while if we don't know or if it's not important. Take a look at these sentences and see if you can figure out if it needs during, while, or for in each of these blanks. Try to remember the rules we just looked at. Go ahead, give it a try. Here's the answers for those blanks. For number 1, we didn't talk during the meal. In this case, you can see that the only thing in this clause is the meal, so we can use during in this case. Number 2, I was in the countryside for 2 weeks. Because this is a specific amount of time using a number, 2, we have to use for in this blank. Number 3, didn't you watch the news while you were on holiday? Here you can see that you were on holiday could be a sentence on its own. It's an independent clause, so we have to use while in this blank. Number 4, I always get so sleepy during the afternoons. Number 5, your cousin called while you were out. Number 6, during his time here, he made a lot of improvements. I hope you got those all correct. Thank you for studying with me about these prepositions, before, after, during, and while. These are helpful for us to talk about time and to tell when something happens, or if 2 things are happening at the same time. I hope to see you again next time. Bye-bye!